Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of my podcast, Radio Bay. So let's get started. I've been thinking a lot about personal growth lately, what it really means to grow, and how we often forget that the process is anything but linear. There have been times where I felt lost or stuck, struggling to find my footing. And as I look back, it's clear that my relationship with myself, my self-esteem, motivation, and productivity has played a huge role in shaping my path. In this episode, I want to share my reflections on these topics, how they've impacted my journey, and maybe you'll find some parallels in your own experiences too. What is self-esteem really means to me? When I used to think about self-esteem, I thought it was something fixed. Either you had it or you didn't. I often felt like I wasn't good enough, especially when comparing myself to others. Social media didn't help. It was their endless cycle of seeing people accomplish things while I felt like I wasn't moving forward. It took me a long time to realize that self-esteem isn't about perfection or being the best at something, but it's about believing that you are enough even when you're still a work in progress. There was a moment when I understood that self-esteem is like a relationship with yourself, one that requires nurturing. You have to actively remind yourself of your worth, your strengths, and yes, even your flaws. For me, this realization was liberating. It's a process that changes day by day. There are still times when doubt creeps in, but now I know how to recognize it and remind myself that self esteem isn't about external validation. It's something that comes from within. It's accepting who you are at every stage of your journey. How self esteem changed my approach to growth. I used to think personal growth was all about pushing myself to achieve more, set bigger goals, reach higher standards, but when my self esteem was low, no matter what I accomplished, I still felt unsatisfied. I didn't see my own progress. It was like running on a treadmill getting nowhere. It wasn't until I started working on my self-esteem that I realized personal growth isn't just about achieving external things. It's about how you feel about yourself while you're growing. I had to learn to celebrate the small wins. Before, I'd rush of achievements because they didn't feel big enough. But honestly, getting out of bed on a tough day, pushing through fear, or even just being kind to myself when things didn't go as planned, that's growth too. The moment I began treating myself with more compassion, my approach to personal growth changed. I learned to be patient with myself, to allow space for mistakes, and to acknowledge the progress I was making, even if it wasn't always visible. This shift was so important because it allowed me to pursue growth without the weight of constant self criticism. Motivation and the power of purpose. Motivation is tricky, isn't it? There are days when I wake up feeling ready to conquer the world, and then there are those days when everything feels heavy and I just don't want to do anything. I used to blame myself for not always being motivated, thinking it meant I was lazy or undisciplined. But then I started realizing something. Motivation doesn't have to come from big, flashy goals. It can be something much more personal. I found that I'm most motivated when I connect what I'm doing with something meaningful to me. When I focus on my why I care about something, why it matters to me, that's when I feel the spark again. It wasn't about forcing myself to always be motivated, but about understanding that motivation can ebb and flow. And when it dips, it's okay to slow down, recharge, and remind myself why I started in the first place. This approach helped me not to panic when motivation faded, but instead to lean into and trust that it would return when I was ready. Productivity more than just being busy. For the longest time, I thought being productive meant filling every moment of my day with tasks, checking off boxes, and just doing more. But honestly, it left me feeling drained and unfulfilled. I realized I was just keeping busy without making real progress in the areas that mattered to me. Eventually, I learned that productivity isn't about doing everything, it's about doing what's important, it's prioritizing the things that truly matter and letting go of the guilt for not being busy all the time. When I started focusing on quality over quantity, everything changed. Suddenly, I had more time for things that brought me joy, and I didn't feel like I was constantly running out of energy and time. And part of that shift came from being kinder to myself, understanding that rest is productive too. Taking time for self care to recharge mentally and physically became a part of my process. I stopped seeing breaks as wasted time and started viewing them as essential parts of my productivity. Self care and the balance of productivity. Speaking of self care, it's something I didn't value enough for a long time. I was so focused on being productive that I neglected my well being. I thought taking time for myself would slow me down or make me less successful. But the truth is, you can't pour from an empty cup. Incorporating self care into my life didn't just help me feel better, it actually made me more productive. When I allowed myself the space to rest, recharge, and just be, I found I had more energy and focus when it came to work. And most importantly, I felt more in tune with myself. Self care became a way to reconnect with my own needs, to check in on how I was really feeling and to make sure I wasn't burning out. Self care is more than just pampering, it's about setting boundaries, knowing your limits, and giving yourself permission to step back when you need to. It's an act of respect for yourself and your own journey. In conclusion, looking back on my journey with self-esteem, motivation, and productivity, I can see how they've all intertwined to shape who I am today. There's no perfect formula, no one-size-fits-all solution, but what I've learned is that growth is personal. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's ongoing, but every step forward, no matter how small, is worth celebrating. So, if you're struggling with any of these things, if you're feeling stuck, unmotivated, or questioning your worth, know that you're not alone. It's a journey we're all on, and it's okay to take it one day at a time. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the following episode of my podcast, Right Obey. Bye!